When it comes to the frustrations with their team, here's what I hear most often when I'm working with my founder CEO clients. My team just doesn't listen to me. Okay. Nobody ever follows through, or they don't follow through in the way that's appropriate for the situation. I feel like I'm talking to a wall, right? And the worst one yet, which is like, I just can't trust anybody to do it well. So I might as well do it myself because it'll be better and faster. Okay. If any of these resonate, I want you to just zoom out for a second. And odds are that it doesn't just feel like those repeating thoughts are like the same problem that keeps coming back. It's likely that what it feels like is this is the same type of problem, but it's the same type of problem that happens with the same type of person, no matter what it is that you are doing, implementing, or ultimately hiring inside of your business. And what's driving all of this isn't actually a strategy problem or a systems problem. So those are components and factors of both the problem and the solution. But what's actually driving it is this thing that I call the compensation tax. And I define it as the hidden compounding cycle of profit and time leaks that occur when founders habitually compensate for team dysfunction. And most of the founders that I work with have never really heard of this or articulated it in its fullest sense. Okay. But they generally feel it every single day. So what this video is going to break down is the 6 core ways that the compensation tax shows up in business. So 3 are what I call profit leaks, 3 are what I call time leaks, and none of them respond to, SOPs, strategy, anything that you have likely tried on the like implementation side of things. Okay. So if you've ever felt like you're doing everything right, but you still can't break through, then this video is for you. So without further ado, let's dive into it. In order to understand the compensation tax in its fullest breadth, we got to start by laying the foundation on like, okay, well, where does this actually occur? Why is it relevant to even understand this concept? Where can I spot it? Why is it relevant to me as a founder? And that's what we're going to start with. So the first thing is actually just understanding that the compensation tax as a concept, while it was born out of something that I've seen after hundreds of coaching hours with founders and CEOs, basically relates to the hidden cycle of team-related time and money costs. So if you think of team dysfunction, you can think of the stuff you can see as far as like, okay, this is what they said, this is the drama, this is what's in front of me, these are the fires that are here. The compensation tax looks at, okay, well, how does that ripple out to the other areas of the business, namely in terms of delegation, productivity, and peace of mind? Okay. The other way to look at the compensation tax is these are the cycles, which are oftentimes hidden, that basically drive the day-to-day fires that force founders to grind out 60-hour work weeks, despite the fact that they're paying full-time salaries, right? And we'll get to some of these things at the double payroll, like that's one of the core aspects of the compensation tax. And the net result of this cycle, the net result of this compensation tax is you as a founder tend to be on this hamster wheel of recurring business problems that end up being clumped together as, oh, I'm in a growth ceiling. And this is really relevant because there's 2 core things there, right? So growth ceiling and recurring business problems. So if you have the growth ceiling, let's just say, well, we'll start with that one. Okay. So the growth ceiling in general is going to be tackled by some form of strategy. And that's obviously very important, but it's like, okay, what do we got to change in how we're operating in order to break this ceiling? And it's going to be some version of more, which obviously is necessary. So like more clients, more profit, whatever. And if that strategic decision or that strategic thinking is clumped with, well, we also have all these recurring business problems. Okay. And the way you want to think of it, this is like the relationship equivalent of if you know somebody that's like in a relationship with the exact same person, just with a different face, like the dynamic of the relationship is always the same. It's usually some sort of like toxic, drama ridden type of thing. It just, the face is different. Like they're dating the same person in a different form, but they're basically acting out the same type of dynamic. Okay. If you experience the same thing in business, like I continuously have the same type of holes that I have to fill in some sort of way, I continuously have the same type of problem with the same type of person, right? if that is clumped with a growth ceiling, that is a good indicator that what is actually happening is you're paying the compensation tax. You're not really aware of it. Okay. So we'll dive into all of these in more detail, but this is kind of like the basics of how do I spot the compensation tax in business. Okay. How you as the founder experience this, okay, is generally you as the founder, if those recurring business problems are happening, if the growth ceiling is there, okay, but you as the founder are playing whack-a-mole, right? So you know that game where it's like the mole pops up, you gotta like whack it, etc. Right? So I'm constantly trying to play whack-a-mole with all these businesses that are surfacing. Then you're never really going to be able to create the leverage to break that cycle, right? Because you're busy playing whack-a-mole, you're not busy creating the levers that are going to move things forward, right? So that's how you pay the compensation tax as the founder, okay? The other aspect of it, and this is why this is a hidden cycle, is as a hardworking entrepreneur, okay, you will confuse the compensation tax with just the grind that is necessary to get ahead, okay, which is obviously a common narrative. There's definitely seasons and chapters of your business where the grind is absolutely necessary. And as somebody who like gets the job done, this is going to be a big part of your identity. It's also going to be a big part of why you have succeeded in the way that you have succeeded. So none of this is inherently bad. I'm highlighting to you as like that the grind and necessary narrative, like just saying, okay, well, that's okay in all instances at all times. That's what's going to create a blind spot. That's basically going to confuse your brain into discerning, okay, well, what is the difference between like, this is a chapter that I got to grind at versus I'm paying the compensation tax. Okay. And here's some of the qualities that actually go into like how to make that discernment. Okay. So if most of your team issues revolve around filling up their gaps, okay, then the team's cost is net negative. So they're underperforming. I fill in the gap that they're underperforming. Deadlines are missed. I fill in the gap so it still gets to the client on time. Okay. I'm constantly doing this. They're asking for more money and are entitled. Despite the fact that I do this, I don't really feel like I have the authority and the respect, right? Like you're constantly doing something, but it's never really resolving and building up. This is like, you know, I'm lifting the same weight, but I'm never actually like being able to lift the weight higher. Okay, well, something then isn't adding up. Like, why isn't your body adapting to what it needs to do? So in this instance, why is the business adapting to what it needs to do, given what it is that you're inputting into it? Okay. The same recurring thing. So if the problems day to day are recurring, instead of I have new problems, better problems to handle, right? So again, going back to chapters and seasons, you're always going to have problems, but are they recurring? If they're the same type of thing, we're not actually moving forward, right? If we bring this back to the dating example, the person that perpetually dates the same person, like they're never really moving forward. They're just repeating the same things in a different form, right? If they were to fix what drives them, they would move into a relationship where it's not going to be rainbows and sunshine, because no relationship is. It's just now it's like they're different, higher level problems. They're problems of higher like intimacy, deeper connection, like more vulnerability. Like those are better problems to have than the drama of like who said this, who said what. Okay. So if your problems on the business side are recurring, meaning they're not actually changing form, well, that's a sign you're paying the compensation tax. Okay. And despite all of your attempts to do the right thing, so, implement EOS, create more systems, more SOPs, right? Put in different project management tracking software so you can keep an eye on everything, set up better, different KPIs to get people motivated, right? If that's not really improving it, it's not really moving the needle forward, nobody's really following it, nobody's, it kind of feels like when companies put their mission statement on the wall. It's like, there we go, we did it. And then kind of like, okay, that's BS. Well, for the companies that like live it, it's not BS. It is the North Star and the guiding light. For others, it's just an activity that they did on a workshop, right? So this is the same kind of thing. Like if you're implementing all the right things, the systems are there, you can show them, but nothing's really moving. Okay, well, that means something else is driving it, right? So what's the compensation tax? It's the hidden cycle that creates these issues. Okay. So now that we know kind of like what to spot it, you can see kind of the instances. We're going to get more specific into like, okay, well, what actually is it? Well, what's the definition of it? Okay. So as you've seen already, this is not going to be something you're going to be able to ask your accountant about. It's not going to be a line item of like, oh, well, this is the expense that it's costing me. And the reason that I point this out at this point is this is something you're going to feel day to day, as you've seen in the other examples, but it's going to be hard to point to. So it's something that is a hidden in, like you have to infer what is going on, and I will break that down for you. But the definitions we're going to be using to spot it even more specifically is basically it is the overlooked. Okay, so that's the hidden cycle aspect we talked about. It compounds over time. So the longer it continues to be unaddressed, the more it compounds in terms of profit and time leaks. Okay. And again, these are not going to be line items. They're going to be things that accumulate to the growth ceiling and recurring problems. And they're compounding in nature. So they get worse over time. And these things happen when founders, knowingly or not, habitually compensate for team dysfunction. Okay. So we talked about before where it's like, okay, well, you're jumping in certain instances. Nothing's ever changing. You still got to deliver on the things. Why? Because you are somebody that has high standards. So I'm not going to let this fly. Okay, again, good qualities. And if it's happening chronically, if it's happening habitually, okay, then compensation is occurring around the team dysfunction. Okay, so that's the compensation tax. Overlooked compounding profit and time leaks caused by habitual compensation for team dysfunction. Okay. So the rest of this video is going to look at, well, what does that look like specifically? What are the profit and time leaks that tend to occur here? And that's what we're going to be breaking down. Okay. And, oh yeah, before we get to that, compensation tax affects this type of founder the most. Okay. So kind of giving you an overview of what it's like, but it manifests generally in the empathetic, people first, nice guy or girl founder the most. So you are less likely to see the compensation tax being a big issue with like a-hole founders or bosses. Okay. And that is simply because they have a very low tolerance for all of these compensation things that we're going to like look into, these compensation patterns. They have different issues, right, which are outside the scope of this video, but it's like generally the a-hole doesn't suffer the compensation tax. It is generally going to be the nice guy, the nice girl founder that is people first, that has high empathy, that cares for people. Okay. They're much more likely to suffer this. Okay. And generally that is why they have the hardest time with difficult employees, with team drama, with delegation, getting and retaining A+ talent. We'll go into the profit and time leaks that kind of show this, but just understand like this is really the lay of the land, kind of the foundation of what we're working on, right? Compensation tax, how do you spot it in business? Who does it mostly affect? Now we'll dive into the specifics, okay? So there are basically 6 different profit and time leaks, kind of 3 on each that I've seen categorized amongst all of the clients that I've worked with this. So double payroll is going to be one. That's the first one we're going to dive into. And I'll just quickly go through these. So the profit leaks, as you'll find, this is generally stuff that is more external. Like you will see it out there and it'll be kind of between the lines. The time leaks are going to be more internal. Okay. They're going to be more on you as the founder. How are you leaking your time, which is generally the most important resource that you have? Okay. And that comes down to emotional and mental toll, time you spent babysitting adults, and the turnover of your A players. All right. So getting into specifics now, profit leak number 1, which is the double payroll. So the visible part of this is obviously your payroll costs. This is the component that you can see on your P&L. Okay. What you can't see on your P&L is the output that you get. This is what I was saying before about the part that you feel every single day when you are creating or managing and taking out the fires of people. So if let's just say for easy math, right? You pay out $100,000 for payroll. You expect to at least get an output of value that is worth $100,000. Okay. However, if in the duration of all of that, you have to compensate for a lot of underperformance, and I'm not saying training costs like that, that's part of like training up your good people, that is not even a necessary evil, but it is a necessary investment is a necessary responsibility in the people that you are stewarding inside of your company. So that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about, again, recurring problems, as we talked about at the beginning. The recurring underperformance of the exact same thing, well, now we're compensating that there's something missing. So what I'm paying for, right, and what I'm outputting, there is a major gap between those two. Okay, so that's one component of the double payroll. So we'll build up to that. The other component that you want to be aware of here is like what's needed to create enough leverage to actually scale. Okay, so your payroll costs should be something that creates enough leverage that it gives me more than what I put into it. So if I put in 100K of employee costs, I should be able to get out whatever factor, 120, 150, 200, whatever, right? But they should be creating more leverage than I'm actually paying out. Okay. And I know this is a very generalized statement. Not everything's going to fall into stuff like this, especially if you have like compliance roles, like, accounting, et cetera. Like, I'm not really going to be making you money, but I'm just talking about in terms of like the generally like what you are subjectively feeling here. Like, are these people carrying their weight? Are they adding more than they are taking away? Okay. That is what creates the first gap. And how that relates to this gap is like, well, what is needed to create enough leverage to scale? So you need more, and there needs to be more momentum to beat the inertia of where you are to get to the next level. Okay. And that is going to continue to occur every single time. So first part of the compensation tax is if you are making up for this, by redoing work, by filling in the gaps of deadlines, by not delegating important work, but actually doing it yourself. Like, all of this means you're paying double just for them to earn their keep here. And you're never going to be able to outwork what's required to get to the next level. Okay. And this is really where the double payroll starts to contribute to the growth ceiling, because your work in compensating for underperformance gets you up to here. What's required is needed here. And this is only able to like be achieved through compounding effort, right? So the sum is greater than the, or the total is greater than the sum of the individual parts, right? That's what compounds the team to go up. And then this is the actual growth ceiling that occurs. So the way you want to look at this as far as, okay, well, what's the profit leak here? So part of it is your payroll costs, okay, which is clean and visible. The other part of it is, well, what is your time that is spent here? Okay, that is your CO hourly rate that you do pay. You literally pay it every single time you are redoing somebody else's work, you're micromanaging it, or you're fixing it at 8 p.m. Because the reality is that time is still spent working. And yes, it's not spent on building the business, but you could think of it even in terms of like, if all you did was reallocate that time towards just consulting work for whatever rate you're willing to work at, that's still work that could be reallocated towards something that could put money, literally profit, inside of your pocket, not even the business's pocket. So this is the double payroll, right? You're paying this and you're also paying this, okay? And never able to reach this. And this is where the stress and the overwork and the 60-hour work weeks, despite full-time salaries, pops into play, right? So now you're seeing the specific cycle of you see this, you feel this, you watch and ponder why this can't be happening. And then we just keep going again and again and again and again, right? And you're recurring that way. So that is a key part of the profit leak, which is like the double payroll. Okay. So moving on now to number 2, which is the firing freeze. Okay, so in the firing freeze, this is where the team dysfunction isn't just in the underperformance, but it breaks down into what inevitably every founder goes through to some degree or another, which is like that reality that somebody that should have been let go and should have been fired 6 months ago are still on payroll today, right? And insert whatever time period, like sometimes this is years, sometimes it's months. So, rarely if you're in this position is it weeks, but generally months or years. Okay. The hesitation and the avoidance that keeps them around, that feeling, and then the subsequent consequence of it, that they're still here 6 months later, that's the firing freeze. Okay. And the firing freeze isn't just the 6 months of payroll costs for inefficiency. Okay. That's kind of like the double payroll. That's explicit. It's a tangible line item. Okay. There's also the implicit cost, again, that compensation tax cost. That's much more expensive long-term. Okay. Because they are the intangibles that make a culture feel dysfunctional. Okay. Firstly, there's the loss of respect. Okay. And I know this is like it can be a heavy topic because it's like, there's always going to be a subconscious part of you that understands this person should have been gone 6 months ago and I can't pull the trigger for whatever the reason is. Like, there's going to be half truths to all of these. So like they're working on a project that legitimately I need them for, and it's more expensive and timely to like hire somebody else. Yes, that is always going to be true. And these are compounding, right? The cancer spreads in a compounding fashion. So hard decisions are hard for a reason, right? So like this is not always black and white, but regardless, subconsciously, right, there is going to be part of your brain that's going to lose trust in your own ability to pull the trigger, to make hard decisions, to make fast decisions. And while nobody around you is going to say it, they are going to feel it. And they're going to know the exact same thing of like, we know this person should be going, right? So, and now compounds, right? The compensation tax of the firing freeze compounds to people around you. It affects your A players the most. So if you remember at the beginning, I talked about, okay, what are the qualities of the compensation tax? What does it look like? How do you spot it? Getting and keeping A+ talent is part of it. And part of that is the firing freeze, because when your A players see this is what you tolerate, they're not going to call it out to your face because you're the boss, but they will resent it secretly, because they see that the underperformance of somebody that should have been fired is not just accepted, but it's implicitly protected because you're not making the move to actually do it. Okay, so this is a huge, again, indirect cycle of hidden things that ripple out. Okay, and this is why I spent so much time talking about this, because it is really a subtle thing. Okay. Team-wise, so even beyond your A players, right? The loss of cohesion and good ideas that are crushed, especially if the fire freeze is perpetuated by somebody that is of a toxic nature. So if somebody that always puts things down, always, makes mountains out of molehills, always makes it such a drag to even get anything done, that is very, risk averse, or like always passes the buck, etc. It's like people would rather not deal with that stress than put out good ideas. Okay. So again, rippling out, and the more it ripples out, the less obvious it becomes. But what happens again, you feel it every single day and you pay for it indirectly. Okay. Moving on to the last profit leak, which is scope creep. Okay. And this is one of those, like, how you do one thing is how you do everything situation. So generally, if you have found yourself in any of the previous profit leaks, you are more than likely to do this one. So like, if you don't address your underperformers, you are likely going to have boundary violations when it comes to clients, because firstly, the dynamic and the leverage of the dynamic is different. So you're paying your employees. So you technically have the leverage on like, this is what I need from you. I need you to deliver. Your client now has that leverage with you. So like, if you can't do it where the leverage is on your side, generally it's pretty much guaranteed you're going to do it in some fashion here. Okay. And this is what The second point is like, it's guaranteed you're going to have these boundary violations when you're getting paid versus paying. And this is different and unique from over delivery. Okay. So like over delivery in terms of client satisfaction is just like, I have a high standard of service, so I'm going to deliver something exceptional or something extra as a bonus, etc. Right. Over delivery to the point where is more expensive, like it is above and beyond, right? It creeps way too much into your margins, eats away your capacity, says yes to unreasonable demands. Like now we're not over delivering. Okay. Now we are overcompensating for something. Like we are trying to keep them, prove them, not stand up to them. Like we're doing something else, but it's not over delivery, because over delivery actually feels good. Like it's like, it feels good. Like, no, I'm going to do such a fabulous job and like, we're going to get paid appropriately for it. That's a much different energy than, okay, well, yeah, I guess, that they're a pretty big client, so I'll do this XYZ thing, even though I know I shouldn't. Okay. And other people see this, right? So your A players will see this. You're going to drain capacity out of them. You're now setting the standard for what's actually appropriate. Like it all resonates outward and ripples outward, right? So that's kind of the thing. So bottom line, right? You're overperforming beyond what's necessary while footing the bill so you maintain a good relationship, right? It's putting a bow on overperforming and calling it over delivering. Okay. So it is a distortion of something that is a good quality, which again, the compensation tax tends to be across the board. All right. So just to kind of bring this back to the visual from the beginning, right? All those 3 profit leaks that we mentioned, even though I use this example in the payroll, like the double payroll, ultimately that gap between what you pay for your people versus what you actually get out of it is what creates the compensation tax. Okay. And the scope creep basically pushes this down because it steals capacity out of the team that you have. So it basically makes this gap even larger, which is how it falls into this whole thing. Okay. So that's everything as far as the profit leaks are concerned. So we're going to move on to the time leaks. Like I said, time leaks in general are going to be more internal. Everything we talked about on the profit leaks tend to be kind of like out there, the team, the client. On the time leak side, it's you can think of them different ways, like bandwidth leaks. Okay. So again, profit leaks implicit in the situation involving the people. Time leaks are the internal reality of you as the leader, the CEO, the founder, and then the responsibilities that you carry. Okay. So example being company culture. And fundamentally, even though a lot of these are even more subjective than the profit leaks, the kind of through line amongst all of them is they fundamentally circle around time, because the quality of your time is basically the unrenewable resource that you are always striving for. So in time is where you will find your attention. In time is where you will find your inspiration. In time is where you will find your focus. Like time is the currency of all of the qualities and the characteristics that are necessary for you to do what you need to do to move your life and business forward. Okay. So with that being the case, time leak number 1, mental and emotional toll. Okay. So let's just look at the underperformer one more time, right? We looked at the double payroll in terms of profit leaks. What does the underperformer look like in terms of time leaks? So underperformer, go home at 5 p.m., right? When 5 p.m. hits, they check out. They're basically now thinking, how do I make my evenings enjoyable? Okay. That's not the case for you. Because generally, when 5 p.m. hits, you, as the founder compensating for the underperformer, you end up starting your work at this point. Okay. This is where all the compensation occurs, because you've just had to deal with all the fires up to 5 p.m. So now we get into this massive cycle of compensation, and this is where it starts. So as we've mentioned, what that looks like is your evenings are spent redoing the work, right? Worrying about all the stuff that's happening, over analyzing. And that means your time isn't just passing away kind of willy-nilly, right? It's not just time taking away. This is actual time that drains your mental and emotional capacity for all of the important things that you need to do. So it is about the quality of the time, not just the quantity of the time. Okay. In essence, what this time leak is about is based on the foundation that like all time isn't created equal. You passing time is I watch an hour watching a show or I pass an hour watching a show on Netflix. Okay. That's not equal to I was inspired for an hour to solve this big problem we have in our business versus I spent an hour stressed out because I was redoing somebody else's work. Okay. That is a time leak. That is a mental and emotional toll leak that essentially can't be replenished. Profit leaks can be reallocated and recaptured, but not time leaks. Okay. And this is important because, as you know, strategic, creative thinking, inspiration time, that needs space in order to occur. That is your highest leverage time as the leader, as the CEO, and as the founder. Okay. And as I was saying before, profit leaks are replaceable. Mental emotional bandwidth is not. And when time leaks compound, okay, that is what's paid as the compensation tax. Okay. And now we are further and further removing away from like, okay, what are the things that I can actually visibly see in terms of the P&L statement? But like the irony is the less you can see it, the more real it ends up being in terms of what it costs you. Okay. It's invisible, but it is a major factor in your growth ceiling. Okay. Moving on to time leak number 2, babysitting adults. So again, going back to this theme of time spent babysitting adults is still time that is not spent doing something else. Okay. Emotional, mental compensations, that bandwidth is indirect. Babysitting team drama, okay, or should be of adult employees. You can see it like it's like there. So it's much more direct. Okay. This is what creates the friction points in getting things done. So if I have to spend time navigating, reconciling, buffering, managing things that adults shouldn't be getting into to begin with, all of that cumulatively across all of the team, that's what compounds into, okay, well, we're not getting things done. And I know I'm stating the obvious because you feel this every single day, but this is about, okay, have I actually sat down and looked at the cumulative compounding all arching effects of this across the whole business? Okay. So that's kind of where it's coming from. Now, to get into some of the more specific. So you and your A players compensate for team drama. People that make drama tend to thrive in drama. Drama doesn't get a lot of things done. Who gets a lot of things done? You and your A players. So whatever is not completed by these people, it tends to shift and be put onto you and your A players to actually complete. Okay. And there's an important thing to distinguish here, which is like, what's the difference between like growth and babysitting? Here, I mean like growing employees to like manage situations better. Okay. Growth in general doesn't matter if you're thinking about like, okay, like working out, if you're thinking about like relationships and like there's a fight in a relationship and like now we're stronger for the result of it. The commonality is like there's generally a low, but because of that low, we learn something and we grow, right? If you're into martial arts, the sentiment of like we either win or we learn. Okay, so if we're winning, like we keep doing the same thing. If we didn't win, then we didn't lose, but we need to extract a value out of it. We need to extract a lesson out of it, and that is the learning. Okay, so growth, there's a high after a low. Babysitting and the drama that comes along with it, it basically just, when you resolve it, at best, we come back to the baseline. Like we're never really learning anything, right? And going back to what we said at the very beginning, if it's recurring, then it's a compensation tax. Okay. Then it's, I have to continuously get into it. and I'm not able to actually move forward. Okay. So babysitting adults is compensating for carrying dead weight across finish lines. I know it sounds harsh, but that's fundamentally how it ends up working more often than not in everything that I see with the clients that I walk through this. Okay. Moving on to the last time leak, which is A player turnover. So when I said at the beginning that like a-hole bosses and leaders and founders generally don't pay the compensation tax, the reason for that isn't because being an a-hole is like the right thing to do. It is because the way that they go about being an a-hole, that's the part that creates the distrust and the tension. But what they're actually really good at is just saying no. Like generally people that are a-holes just say no to a lot of things. They say it in terrible ways. They say it at the expense of other people, but like they're just like, this is the way that it is. This is what I want. I say no to everything else. Okay. So that's what a-holes do. Founders that say no properly also understand that company culture is created by what you say no to. Okay. So it's not, yes, these are our values, and yes, this is how we implement them. That is part of it. But what actually makes that stick is we say no to things that are outside of those values. That's the hard part, right? Have you ever heard that sentiment of like, they're not principles, they don't cost you anything? If they don't cost you anything, they're just opinions. Like I think I have an opinion that companies should be run this way. Well, if when the time comes and like you got to pay the price for that now, it's like, okay, well, that's the actual principle that's at play. So what you say no to matters more than what you say yes to. Okay. And most of the time, founders that pay the compensation tax say yes when internally they tend to mean no. When an underperformer underperforms, instead of saying no, that's not appropriate, they just stay quiet, make an excuse, buffer it, compensate it, whatever, right? They're saying an inherent yes to it. Okay. So everything you should have said no to becomes the standard of what you're willing to tolerate. So basically, what sets the standards is what you tolerate. It's not what you actually want or aspire to. Again, what you tolerate becomes your actual company culture. Now, why is this relevant as far as your A players are concerned? Because when you justify the C players' underperformance, or you get stuck in a firing freeze, like what we talked about in the profit leaks, your A players are watching. And what they're watching for is, okay, well, what are you not saying no to? What are you enabling? What are you compensating for? What are you acquiescing to? Okay. That is when the resentment starts building, because all they see is low performance, low standards being said yes to. So like, why am I even trying? What is the point of all of this? Okay. They're never going to say it out loud. They're never going to like call you out on it, right? This happens generally under the radar. So these are second order consequences of the silence, of the hesitation, essentially of the compensation, which is your top performers end up quitting, which then creates an environment where you're now reliant on the B and C players, right? Which then perpetuates all of the fires because there's more of them now. So that means you have to compensate more. And now, right, we get into the compounding cycle of the compensation tax. Okay, so this time leak, while it looks like it's about the A player, it's actually about the compensation. Okay. And when you tolerate a broken culture, you actually drive the best people away because they want high standards, they want autonomy, and they want consistency in hard decisions and hard no's for that. That's actually what makes them A players. Okay. And now, in addition to just having to put out more fires, right? We all know how hard it is to like hire people. So, right, you're screening for resumes, you're interviewing, you're doing all of the things that you shouldn't be doing if you just uphold and upheld the standards in the first place, right? And now we get back into the analogy of the hamster wheel keeps turning, forcing more compensation tax, lost hours, lost talent, compounding in that growth ceiling that you cannot seem to break away through. And what's the other indicator, right? Recurring problems. all that's left over is your B and C players, you're going to have recurring problems guaranteed because there's less A players to compensate them for, right? So recurring problems, growth ceiling, those two go hand in hand. All right. So if you've made it this far and this resonates with you, check out the stuck pattern video, which actually describes the 5 patterns that drive the compensation tax from the leadership perspective. And you'll find a link to that below.